Welcome to Stories with Soul. I am your host, Jamey Ice, musician turned entrepreneur and co-founder of 6th Ave Homes and 6th Ave Storytelling. Over the past 10 years, I have launched multiple successful businesses and have become obsessed with all things entrepreneurship and marketing. I've been on a personal quest to unpack what it takes to make and grow a great brand. One thing that I've discovered is that stories are powerful and that storytelling has the power to set a brand apart. Join me as I dive into the stories of the heavy-hitting leaders, entrepreneurs, artists, and business owners in our community to hear their biggest wins, greatest losses, and their best business secrets. There's a story behind every great brand. Welcome to Stories with Soul. Stories with Soul is brought to you by my company, 6th Ave Storytelling. In 2020, we launched a marketing company on a mission to encourage entrepreneurship and make starting and growing a small business easier than ever before. Since then, we have helped hundreds of small businesses and entrepreneurs grow their brands by giving them the tools, resources, strategy, and support they need to craft and share their stories. If you are thinking about launching and growing your own brand, schedule a meetup with me today. I would love to talk to you. Head over to 6thAveStorytelling.com and let me show you how the storytelling approach can transform your marketing strategy. This episode of Stories with Soul is sponsored in part by Project 202, the leader in experience-driven software strategy, design, and development. Whether you're looking to build a new software solution, redesign your mobile app, or kick off a digital transformation initiative, Project 202's customized approach creates solutions that work for your customers. Customer experience drives engagement, and cultivating that experience requires a ton of attention and time. Project 202 is local and has 18 years of design leadership. This team is an expert in using customer-centric methods to build compelling, data-driven customer experiences. Wherever you're at in your business journey, the diverse team at Project 202 will guide you from idea to execution. Go to project202.com. That's projekt202.com and click Contact to begin winning the hearts of your customers and exceeding your business goals today. Welcome to Stories with Soul. I am your host, Jamey Ice. Today, I am joined by someone that I've never actually met in person until today, and I have been an admirer of for quite some time, Leonard Firestone. I'm glad you're here. As mentioned, I'm about to read your bio in front of you. So Leonard co-founded the Firestone and Robertson Distilling Company, where he and his partner created TX Whiskey and TX Bourbon brands, arguably two of the biggest brands to come out of Fort Worth. As co-founder, Firestone was responsible for leading the organization's sales, marketing, and production strategies while scaling the business to become the largest American whiskey distillery west of the Mississippi.
Correct.
That's wild. In 2019, the F&R company was acquired by the second largest multinational spirits company in the world. Before his work in the distilling industry, Firestone worked in the broadcast and cable industries. He served as president and general manager of the ABC affiliate in Jacksonville, Florida, as well as being the co-founder of a children's cable television network. That's interesting. We'll have to dive into that. In 2020, he served on former Mayor Price's Fort Worth Now task force. This was a COVID-19 recovery committee which provided financial assistance to small businesses adversely affected during the pandemic. And he currently serves on the Fort Worth City Council and is active on several boards and committees, including the Entrepreneurship and Innovation Committee Chair, the Mobility and Infrastructure and Transportation, the Audit Committee. That doesn't sound quite as fun. And the Regional Coordination Committee, protecting areas around the Naval Air Station and Reserve Base. You're on the board of Trail Drive Management, which I just had Matt Homan in with Dickies. And, that was a fun conversation. And the Fort Worth Sports Authority. So welcome. You've done a lot. You're doing a lot.
Thank you.
And you're kind of retired, but
kind of, but
have a full time.
I do. But first off, thanks for having me.
Yeah,
nice to be here.
So I think one of the reasons I'm excited to have you on is one, I feel like TX Whiskey and TX Bourbon, like the distillery, you guys created one of the biggest brands to come out of Fort Worth. Something that kind of became a household name, became popular. And then 2, you have sort of lived the entrepreneur's dream of creating something beautiful and meaningful that everybody loves, then also selling it so that it can grow even bigger. And now you get to retire but not really retire.
Right.
But that's
it doesn't feel like retirement.
You've scaled, like you did it. You did the thing, sold it. And I mean, like, I've done a lot, but I haven't. It's like there's always someone that's the level above you, and so I've wanted to sit down and like meet you and pick your brain for quite some time. Coming out of it, like, do you feel like is there like another level that you're wanting to reach? Like, because in my mind, this is like something I'm like, you're like an inspiration. I'm like, I want to do that type of thing.
Well, to answer the question, it's kind of bittersweet, because it was everything you described, from creating something from literally a piece of paper with Troy Robertson to scaling the business and having that exit, which, we always had in mind, and we had investors, and of course that was an expectation. But it was bittersweet because, it was our baby. And we had a lot of fun with it. We worked so hard at it, and it wasn't always easy. It's one of those things that now, looks like it was just so smooth. And
it's never easy. They're never, ever easy.
So we had our challenges along the way. It's a hard business. It's a very hard, competitive business.
The spirit industry.
Yeah, absolutely.
Why do you say that?
Well, competition. And it's competition on the shelves at stores. It's competition on premise, which are bars and restaurants. Competition from these big companies like Pernod Ricard, who acquired us. There's multi-billion-dollar industry.
My assumption is part of the hardness is also it's expensive. Like to compete at that, it's not like a restaurant, or it's not like a real estate shop, or like to do spirits. Like you kind of have to go big or go home. I'm assuming.
Well,
to compete with the.
Actually, I would say it's not totally that. So you can get into that game of one-upsmanships and sponsorships and doing events and swag and trying to do constant product innovations a lot of the time, or you see companies do. And we stayed away from that side. We just really focused on the core business, 2 products, really only TX Whiskey and TX Bourbon.
And was that intentional from the start?
It was, and it was funny. When we got probably, 5 years or so into it, flavored whiskeys became really hot. So call it 2015-ish. And we were getting a lot of calls from our distributor and others saying, hey, why aren't you doing a maple-flavored TX or blueberry-flavored TX, all that kind of thing, that were coming out and had a moment of popularity but faded ultimately pretty quickly. And we didn't want to be distracted, and people were responding really well to our product, and we just wanted to lean into that. So that's from a product standpoint.
If you weren't playing the sponsorship game and playing the big Super Bowl commercial game, like what was some of the secrets to the success?
So it's really simple, and it's a great, I think, powerful lesson for entrepreneurs, was that the best marketing was word of mouth. It was people sharing our product with their friends. And, we literally didn't have a marketing budget when we first started, because we were plowing all the capital into our infrastructure with the stills and producing the bourbon, which we knew we were going to have to age for. At the time when we started, we were going to do it at least 2 years. It ultimately meant was 5 years.
It's a crazy business model.
And you got to
make this thing and wait for 5 years.
And
how does that work?
Talk about a challenging spreadsheet.
Was that did you make a spreadsheet that said that?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, we had to plan for all that.
This episode is brought to you by my good friends at Visit Fort Worth. Visit Fort Worth is the official destination marketing organization of the 13th largest city, and I would say the greatest city, in the United States, dedicated to promoting Fort Worth as a premier business and leisure destination with thriving centers of creativity, culture, and commerce. Visit Fort Worth is the parent organization of the Fort Worth Herd, the Fort Worth Film Commission, Fort Worth Sports Commission, Visita Fort Worth, and Music Initiative Here Fort Worth. They are doing a lot of amazing things. For more information on Visit Fort Worth, head over to visitfortworth.com and follow them on social at Visit Fort Worth. This episode is sponsored by the Fort Worth Business Press. As a Fort Worth entrepreneur and small business owner, the Business Press is my favorite source for news and updates about the entrepreneurial community in and around Fort Worth. I read their email newsletter literally every day. It's always full of insights and stories that really matter. Are you ready to be more connected? Sign up for their free newsletter at fortworthbusinesspress.com. But if you're like me and the newsletter just isn't enough, you can become an insider. With the code STORYTELLING10, all one word, you'll get a discount on the insider membership. Insiders receive exclusive access to special content, 24 issues of the Business Press delivered to your door each year, and discounts on event registrations and more. Join me and the Fort Worth Business Press in staying up to date on the people, companies, and issues that matter most to Fort Worth.
So, and, we were fortunate because TX Whiskey did better than anticipated, so we could wait longer financially for the bourbon to age because
you could make that much quicker.
We could, and the bourbon we could see was just getting better and better.
So you're like, don't touch it, don't mess with it.
Yeah. And so again, just kind of back to that marketing piece, it was word of mouth, and what we did to stimulate it pretty early on when we started touring people at the distillery, going out on premise and off premise and doing tastings, people were really responding to the quality of the product, the flavor of TX whiskey. So what we tried to do was get the product, get the whiskey to as many people as quickly as possible. So we would donate to every charity that called, and there were a lot.
Okay.
There were festivals that were, interested in would you donate to the Green Room, things like that. So we were, for us, we felt like really efficient, relatively cheap marketing.
You were like, if I can get it in somebody's hands.
Get it in their hands. Get them to taste it.
Which is cheaper than buying ads or paying.
Oh, absolutely.
But it's still expensive. It still costs you to make that.
It costs you, but again, a lot cheaper.
And you were head of marketing, like you sort of. I'm assuming like you and your partner, y'all both had different hats that you.
Yeah, we did ultimately at the start when there's two of us and then there was three. You're doing everything, and it was really complex because you have this product that we released into the market that you have to attend to, and then product that we're making every day and aging. And so the spectrum of, I guess, business skill sets that we really had to lean into, from a factory to a sales and marketing organization, it was a full day. It was a full day, believe me.
Well, can you take me on a dive into your background and how that primed you or set you up to be qualified even to do that? Like, take. So you were in. We talked a little bit earlier. You were in TV. You originally started doing sales, right, for a network.
Have you been talking to my wife?
Take me there. Take me there.
She was like, "You want to do what?" When I told her that I wanted to start a distillery, which was a complete left turn.
Yeah.
And you would not naturally make the connections that I had any business even thinking about, doing or getting into a business like that. And I think she said to me, she was like, it seems more like a hobby than it does really your career and our family. And so
Because your kids were young when you...
kids were super young.
And you said I wanted...
And she was pregnant with our fourth when we launched it.
And you went... So there was a moment where you went to her and said, I want to do this for a career.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah. Well, I mean, listen.
Were you making... Can you even make whiskey at home? Could you make bourbon at home?
Not legally.
Okay.
Not legally.
You're like bootlegging it in the...
But I can tell you there's a picture of me with my probably 2-year-old son on my knee with a still in our backyard. It's terrible.
You had a still in your backyard?
Yeah.
What does that look like?
I shouldn't publicize that.
It's in the past. You're on the city council now. No one will ever...
Yeah, exactly.
Statute of limitations.
Yeah, I can't remember where we got it, but either fabricated. No, we bought it. We got it online somewhere.
Which I'm assuming, so you had to be into bourbon and whiskey.
Yeah, I was always a fan.
Did you become what was the point where you're like, I love this?
Yeah, it was interesting. So I call it sort of the entrepreneur light bulb moment. Mm-hmm. So we can talk about what I was doing prior, but had a communications company which we sold in 2007. And was kind of looking for the next thing.
So you had an exit before that?
Yes.
What was your communications company?
That was a satellite uplink facility and a Spanish language children's cable network that we started.
What does a satellite uplink? What does that even mean?
It was a production facility like we're in right now with television. Satellite uplink capabilities.
So a studio that you could send content.
Correct. So we were
doing it and had a children's network.
Yep,
that was attached to that.
Yeah. So we were managing networks. So it basically outsourced work where we would put together and air their programming and commercials, manage those elements, put them up on a satellite, and then that stream, if you will, goes to cable companies and satellite like DirecTV.
And you started that?
We started that, yeah.
And was that in Fort Worth, or where was that?
It was, and that's what brought me here. So I say we started it. We bought a facility that was going to go into a bankruptcy, so we took it through a prepackaged bankruptcy. And
you were running a network, an ABC network before that. Is that correct?
Before that, I was running the ABC affiliate in Jacksonville, Florida.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then had this opportunity.
Yeah. So it was interesting. So I worked for a wonderful company out of Washington D.C. where I grew up, and first job out of college was with them. Then I stayed with them for about 10 years. And my last position was general manager of it was basically a startup ABC affiliate in Jacksonville. So moved down there, got that a brand new building we built from the dirt.
So a studio,
studios, local news, hired 120 people, and
you're running that show.
And I was running that show.
Meaning you're hiring and doing the P&Ls and doing the
for sure
the strategy.
Correct.
Okay.
Every bit of it.
that was sort of that's where those skills were initially picked up to run it.
Really, yes, and I think developed. But the first job I had with the company was with a station called News Channel 8, which was a 24-hour local cable news station that serviced Maryland, Virginia, and Washington, D.C. Second one like it in the country. There's one in Manhattan called New York One, which we modeled after. And so I joined before we went on air. So it was really part of that process. And
it was a startup.
It's a total startup. And I mention that because I think that's where it got really in my blood, if you will.
The hustle of starting.
The excitement of a startup and the motivation of building a brand and building a product and the challenge. I really liked the challenge of that growth and introduction into a community. So I did that then with the ABC affiliate in Jacksonville, very similar, where complete new brand, literally a new channel on the dial,
Okay.
new call letters, new logos, new facility, new staff, anchors,
And
everything.
they send you down there. They're like,
They sent me down
Leonard,
there to do
go
that.
start this thing.
Correct.
So you must
Correct.
be like, is your superpower kind of wrangling people, or is it numbers and like making things profitable, or is it this sort of marketing? How do I build a brand? Like, what's your sort of strength that they saw that they're like, we want you to be the guy that goes and.
Yeah, I think it starts with people.
Okay.
And I don't know, honestly, but
I'm sure you have some like.
well, I mean, to do anything, if you're going to build a business, it starts with people.
Yeah.
And I think you can have a good brand, you can have a good plan, maybe even have a good business plan, good marketing plan, but unless you can bring good people on board and work as a team, because you can't do it by yourself, ultimately. Yeah. And really, literally manage people, motivate people, and find ways to get consensus to build and motivate and pursue a goal. I think it starts there, and the best thing, one of the best things I should say, if not the top, with the experience with the distillery, was the partnership Troy and I had together. We were so aligned as to what we wanted to do and how we were going to get there. A partnership, business partnership, and people have probably heard this before. I mean, it's a marriage. We were together for 12, 15 hours a day in the early days. And you have to, if that doesn't work, nothing's going to work ultimately. And
the sum of your parts has to be bigger than both of you
100%,
individually.
100%. And kind of check your ego at the door type thing, and enjoy working with each other, which we did, and talking with each other. I mean, God, we spent hours and hours just talking, and it wasn't necessarily at all about just what we needed to do that day, but just sitting and talking about almost dreaming about these moments where we would have long conversations about and give and take about where are we going to go, how are we going to do it, what do we invest in, where spend our money, well, ultimately who do we want to be, and that kind of openness and dialogue in a very free, open willingness
There's
to
a
be
trust,
wrong,
a vulnerability.
trust,
Yeah.
absolutely, be challenged, debate, all of those things. I think because of our relationship, made it work. Made it work. It really did.
Did you? The other kind of beauty of a partnership is different strengths and different weaknesses.
Yeah.
Could you articulate sort of what you felt like you brought to the table, and then what he brought to the table, and how it complemented you?
Yeah, I mean, pretty simply, again, I mentioned earlier, we were all doing this, every job in every department at times in the early stages. But as we grew, Troy's got a finance background.
Okay, so he's numbers.
Private equity,
Okay.
Absolutely. More operations, very mechanical. I mean, he designed and built the prototype for the leather top that became a real signature of our product. He did that in his wood shop at home.
Oh, really? Like the kind of wooden top with a little boot stamp inside.
Did the prototype. So, and then also he's a super talent. He's a great artist. I mean, he's had paintings in his office, and is very creative in that way, and kind of technical in seeing something and then being able to technically execute on it. So that was very distinct from
So he is
my
sort of
skill
a
set.
vision for the brand, kind of the style.
I mean, that bit, both of us,
Yeah.
I think we worked together on it, but it's just the way I was describing, kind of the way I think his brain works.
He's an artist who can technically make it
100%.
Okay.
Yeah, because he
And has that numbers side.
Okay. And where I certainly spent more time was outselling, and that was more my background. As I mentioned, the first job at that cable network was selling advertising.
Yeah, and you got to pick up the phone and just call people.
And did a lot of that, but also did a lot of making appointments and going in and doing that cold call and trying to sell a business on the value of our station and why they should advertise with us. So I like meeting people, telling the story, which is so important.
Storytelling also. TV.
Storytelling is so important. I like doing that and like understanding the marketing plan that can apply to making customers successful, making the product successful. And that's where I think I spent more time, and it was more natural to me.
So to take it back again. So you ran a station, came here for this opportunity to buy and kind of run this other
new facility. Yeah.
Sold that.
Yeah.
And then that was what year did you say that was?
So we sold it 2007.
Okay. And when did you and Troy connect? What year was that?
So we connected in 2009.
2009. So there was a couple years of you being bored and drinking whiskey and making whiskey.
I stayed on with the company after they bought us and did that for a little while. And, that's a great example. I mean, when you get acquired, things change, right? There's new ownership and
I'm assuming the pressure's off a little bit.
In some ways. But so I was just sort of thinking about what's next, and again,
you got to dream
and get kind of those entrepreneurial wheels turning again and looking for opportunities. And I tell people this story. It was really remarkable. When asked where did the idea to get into the distilling business come from, and I think it was 2009, may have been 8, but there was a story on Tito and Tito's vodka, of course, everyone knows, in the Sunday New York Times, and I was reading this story. I had seen the vodka, of course, but reading the story because he had really gotten to a tipping point where it's getting a lot of traction and growing. And just as a consumer, I was like, well, this is interesting. A Texas vodka seems to be doing great. I wonder if anyone's doing a whiskey, because I'd like to go try that or buy it, So Google that, and literally nothing comes up.
So you saw a need.
That was a moment. Okay. So just kind of, I stepped through it a little bit. So Google that, nothing comes up. But what that search did was take me to some craft distilleries in Colorado, California, Oregon. And that was really the light bulb moment, because I could quickly see that here was a burgeoning industry yet to come this way. Immediately could see it was very similar to craft beer in the traction that was getting. And with a little bit of research, saw Texas was the second largest consuming state of whiskey in the country.
Interesting.
And none of it's made here.
Yeah.
And I thought, holy smoke, whoa, this could be something. And it was one of those ideas that the more I got into it and kind of peeled back the onion, the more sense it made. And there's some ideas you kind of go down rabbit holes and you maybe really want it to work, but then you're forcing it, and it's just like ultimately, it's like, God, I was so stupid.
This kept reinforcing.
Reinforcing is the right word. Reinforcing.
And so it sounds like it was less, you liked whiskey, you liked bourbon, but less of like, I'm a hobbyist who just wants this, and more of like, you have an entrepreneurship brain because I feel like an entrepreneur is like someone who sees an opportunity and gets excited about opportunities and creating and filling a space where there's a void, where there's a way to do it better. And it sounds like that's sort of. Are you a small business owner or an entrepreneur? Do you do marketing for a small business? If so, I have something that I want to give you, and it's totally for free. We've put together a free resource at 6appstorytelling.com/download, and it's the secrets, it's the tips, it's the tricks, it's the tools of the trade. It's literally everything we do at 6app Storytelling to help small businesses grow. Go download it today at 6appstorytelling.com/download.
I think that's part of it, but I would have to say I was fortunate because I feel like I had this kernel of an idea, a seed of an idea, right? And I would tell people, if you have that instinct, look for the validation where you can find it, and do some quick research, because the best thing, honestly, with some ideas is to fail fast, and you save time, you save money, and again, it's very hard to do alone.
Yeah.
So
what was that validation? What were you telling your friends or your wife?
No, I was very lucky, very fortunate. I have some family out in California in the wine and beer industry.
Oh, really?
And
okay.
yeah, my uncle had started Firestone Vineyards in 1972.
Okay.
And the Central Coast of California, which was the first vineyard, believe it or not, on the Central Coast.
Wow.
And he's responsible for a massive industry, really growing in that area. And his son, Adam, followed suit and then started in operating the vineyard, and then creating a great craft beer brand, Firestone and Walker, which is here in Texas and all over the country. So anyways.
So you called them?
Called them. I called my Uncle Brooks and said, hey, I have this idea. Here's what I'm seeing. And he was at that point probably in his early 70s, and he was like, I don't really know anything about that. Why don't you call your cousin Adam?
Okay.
And but I had been around the vineyard as a kid. We would always go to California in the summer and spend time out there, so kind of been around it and seen some things. So call my cousin, and he was like, yeah, it's the category's on fire in California, Utah. And he said, here are some things to think about. And was very, very helpful in that
Do you
regard.
remember what those things were?
Yeah, location was one.
Because so much of a vineyard success is also the experience. It's
the experience.
Also going to go to Napa, and it's these beautiful
that's right.
places.
That's right.
And so, is that sort of, which I think that's, I would attribute that to a big part of your success, was you had this, when you were down off in the South Side, this cool
West
space.
Vickery.
And then you upped the game on that.
Yeah, we did.
Made Whiskey Ranch. Was that from your kind of cousins and California influence?
Yeah, some input on location's important, because you need to think about the power of touring people in the facility.
So he said that from like day one.
Day one, yeah, absolutely. Make it experiential. It's an experiential brand because, it's a lifestyle brand. And, if I think of anything that relates to what I did prior in the television business, I certainly feel like I always saw the whiskey as, yes, a lifestyle brand, but it's an entertainment brand. Okay. And so I would always be looking for ways to develop content around the brand. And that served us well, I think, because it is entertainment at the end of the day. So, the location was key, the experiential aspect of it, the tasting room, very, very crucial and was very important to us. Good branding and a good distributor.
So did you start kind of crafting a plan or even a dream in your head of like there's a product, but then there's also this brand and this place and this experience around it? That was in it from day one.
Yeah, all those elements were in the business plan, honestly. And I have to say we took a year to write the business plan ultimately.
And did you start that? Did you start that before you met Troy?
Yeah,
you did.
Yeah, I did, and Troy was doing the same. And it was, again, just serendipitous and call it just fate that we were both thinking about this idea and starting to do preliminary work on it, business plan, due diligence, that kind of thing. And he actually lived in the same neighborhood, or
Wait,
we lived in the same
Did y'all know each
neighborhood.
other?
We did. I
Okay.
was just about to share that we had met kind of socially, literally in the park of our neighborhood with our kids that are about the same age.
Okay.
And it was with the moms, and it was like, hey, how are you? And chasing the kids around, whatever. And he's a little younger than I am, so, just social circles weren't just immediately overlapped. But we had met each other that way. And again, one of those stories that I'll never forget. So I was home probably working on the business plan, and he calls me and he said, hey, I hear you want to get in the whiskey business. And I was like, how would you possibly know that? Because I literally only talked to my wife about it, and was, just there trying to create a plan, and of course my cousin and uncle, as I mentioned. It just turns out by this time, was probably 2009, there were a couple other guys, distilleries, Balcones and Garrison Brothers, that have gone on to do great things as well. They were just a little ahead of us, and so Troy was down at one of them. I'm forgetting which one, and I had been there. Oh, it was Garrison, and I'd been there the week before, and so Troy went down, and he was with Dan, and Dan said, "Where are you from again?" It's like, Fort Worth. And he was like, "Oh, another guy from Fort Worth was just down here last week."
And you weren't down there just tasting. You were down there asking questions. And,
Yeah, getting a tour, kind of more of a deep dive, and Dan was pretty gracious about that, just kind of sharing his experience. And it was the early days for him as well. And so Troy and I literally said, well, let's get together for lunch. Went to lunch the next day, kind of mapped out where we were in the process, which we were almost in the identical spot.
Was there any apprehension of like, I don't want to show him all
yeah, for sure.
my whole spreadsheet?
For sure. For sure. I mean, it was a little bit of that feeling out process, but I mean, that went pretty quickly, honestly, because good rapport. And, another lesson is listen, when you get two, you can go against the world. There's I think a famous quote about that. But one, you can be pretty alone, and it's isolating when you're the only guy trying to trumpet an idea. Versus two, you get that partnership, you get that ability to really become better.
You egg each other on,
lift each other up. All that stuff, which is ultimately so important, because there are hard days. There are hard days. And some of our hardest, honestly, were, operationally, we had some challenges, but raising money was brutal. Brutal. We just thought, we'll go get this done. We've got the business experience behind us. I mean, I had 20 years, 25 years.
but
Troy
neither of you had made.
Neither of us had made any whiskey.
You had some in your backyard. Was it good? Were you like, was that what you brought to like, hey, I need a bunch of money.
Yeah.
Were you letting them taste the stuff? Like, was the stuff that you made yourself good?
That was part of the challenge. We didn't have anything to share.
Okay, it was just an idea.
And believe me, what I made, we would not share.
Okay, it was just vision and idea.
An idea, yeah.
And you had to go convince people to give you a lot of money.
Yeah.
And because it's one thing, like, I need to buy the equipment to make whiskey. It's another to, I want to create an experience, and I need real estate, and I need a tasting room.
And I want your investment. It's very hard. Very hard, because with no track record other than, your business experience, with no track record,
Did you have branding or anything at that point?
No.
Nothing.
No,
it's just spreadsheets.
Yeah.
Spreadsheets and your story.
And a really good business plan, as I mentioned.
Okay.
I mean, we were so thoughtful about it. And that's where our experience really paid off.
How did you know what the numbers were? Did people give you that?
Yeah, a lot of research. We went to conferences. We spent time in Kentucky, just more from learning how to literally make it.
And
but
was he working that whole time too, or
he was transitioning out of oil and gas as well.
so y'all were going to conferences in Kentucky and just picking people's brains.
And there was a very new industry kind of trade group called ADI, American Distilling Institute, I want to say, that had literally started maybe the year before, and they have now come on to do some wonderful things. But at that time, it was really how to get into this business and trying to formalize.
Here's how much capital it takes.
Yeah.
Here's what did you know what your margins were, like?
Yeah. I mean, we got there. We got there, but
Were they accurate? Like 5 years later, were you? Like,
yeah, they were actually.
Okay.
They were. Our plan was remarkably accurate 10 years later. The kinds of things that we wanted to do, except for building Whiskey Ranch, what we achieved at the original facility was dead on and exceeded our expectation.
Did you raise enough money, or did you have to go back and ask for more?
We did raise enough, and that was really good counsel we got early on. Was we had one number out there, and we had brought on a consultant to help us through the process, more from a design of the facility itself, the distillery, of the stills and all of that production related stuff. He had done a couple craft distilleries at that point. We showed him the plan, shared with him what we were trying to raise. He said, double it, double everything you're doing
Whoa.
here. And he said, if you do something well, people are going to want it, and you got to be on the shelf, and you can't get out there and then disappear. And that was what really I think was primarily responsible, other than the question about you guys have never done this before.
Yeah.
But we did double everything.
You doubled everything.
Yeah.
After you had already asked for money, or before?
It was midstream. So yeah. And so went back and told the story again to some, and it was a new story to others. But I think our original plan, we had maybe like a 250-gallon still that we were going to use, and that changed to two 500-gallon pot stills, which would make us, or did make us, the largest craft distillery in the country, one of them, close to that.
So you were like, we're going big from day one.
Yeah.
And were people? What was the reaction like when you said, "Hey, I have this idea"?
Well, it's interesting. So we would say we want to distill and produce a bourbon. And of course, we went to friends and family. Then cast a wider net in and around Fort Worth, and a lot of the question that came up consistently was, can you make bourbon outside of Kentucky? And there was this presumption that you could not, that it was an only Kentucky product. So we had to educate people that you actually can produce something called bourbon outside of Kentucky. And our story, I think, once we started to really hone in on the key elements of that question and answering it, other than just, yes, legally you can do that, we honed in on the fact that Texas was actually the perfect place to make bourbon because you could get all the grains here. And it was going to have this distinct Texas flavor as a result of sourcing the grains from you. So that was, in a way, very helpful.
Did you have the whole Texas brand in mind? Like, did you have that concept yet, or
we
no?
We didn't. It was classic. Probably over the year that we were writing the business plan, we had a whiteboard up, and we had several hundred names, brand names, and just look at them and study them, talk about them, and just as I was sharing earlier, just sitting in the office and dreaming, talking, and eliminating in that case the brands until we kind of narrowed it down.
And I had Pat Green as a guest a few weeks ago, and he was like Texans buy Texas.
Yeah.
There's
right.
something
Yeah.
which y'all tapped into. I mean,
Right.
there was an element of not very many people are doing it, and then Texans love. We have this like Texas arrogance and pride that we just love it.
Well, that's very true. And once we saw the TX was available, that was kind of exciting to us. And so we also in the plan, and it related very quickly to that brand. We definitely wanted to leverage Texas and the spirit of Texas, the culture, the attitude, those kinds of things. And we felt that not only could we take advantage of that or just tap into it here and throughout the state, that we called it, there's an inner cowboy in everyone, right? And from New York to Tokyo. And we could capture that spirit. It's so American. Bourbon is so American.
Yeah.
And if we did it right and tap into that kind of perspective and attitude, boy, we could really build off of that. And again, that was in our business plan.
So people said yes.
Yeah.
They gave you money.
Right.
How much equity did you give away to raise?
Oh, I can't remember offhand, but we had a good. We were so thorough. We had done so much work, study, had a distributor.
You already had a distributor lined up?
Yeah, once they saw what we were doing on West Vickery.
Okay, so you found the space on West Vickery.
And we mapped it all out for them. We got our distributor, which was Glazier's, very early on before the product. And
all before the product.
Yeah.
There has to be something to your storytelling and salesmanship to to paint this picture.
I don't know, but they could see it.
Yeah.
They could see that facility, what we were doing with it, what we were investing, and they knew something good would probably result. And they, of course, see hundreds and thousands of brands, so they had a pretty good perspective. And that was really big for us, and certainly then helped the valuation, knowing.
They could give you an idea too of what they thought it would do.
No, for sure. But we could communicate with investors with confidence. Hey, these guys are going to distribute us. So that was one of the big questions that we could resolve.
Answer. So you got the space, you got the investment, you got the distributor. Now you gotta produce.
Yep.
You gotta make the thing.
Yeah.
And you brought on Rob, right? Rob is the
Rob Arnold was our head distiller,
and you brought him on very early. Or had y'all made it first, or did you bring him on to help?
He came on to help and was part of that. The three of us really designed the whiskey and the bourbon together.
And I read this. I was in my researching. Y'all were trying. I guess yeast plays a big role in the taste and the flavor. And you wanted a Texas yeast.
Yeah.
And tell me if this is true or not. But the story goes, he went to this ranch, which is
a friend of mine's ranch.
A friend of yours was collecting yeast off of things.
True, all true.
How does that
all true? So it's the way they used it, and believe me, I didn't know.
How do you get yeast off of? And you wound up getting it from a pecan shell.
Yeah, pecan nut, exactly.
Where is the yeast?
So
how does that work?
The old school way to do it. It's called jug yeast. Okay. And believe me, I didn't know any of this until Rob joined us. Other than when I asked him the questions, what are our options for yeast? You can get off the shelf ones, and I said, well, how did they do it before these big companies provided yeast off the shelf? They do something called jug yeast or a wild yeast, and it was literally they would put one of those glass jugs, kind of like an Ozarka water bottle or something, put some sugars or something in the bottom of it, set it out, and let the wind take over and see what's captured. And Rob did the same thing.
So you just got a bunch of jugs.
Yeah.
And put a bunch of random things
all over DFW. and
sticks things. What else? What besides pecans? What else did you try out?
Oh, fruits, grasses,
Okay.
barks,
Basically.
So,
Yeast grows.
Yeast grows. So you begin. So a couple critical things
Sounds
happen.
so funny.
It was crazy. And ultimately, kind of the end of the story is what we succeeded at was getting a Texas yeast that helped that story of the product story of provenance, which is really important. Mm-hmm. But how we got there was fascinating because it was a couple key players. One, Rob being able to have the capability to even go do this as a scientist, to know how to go capture a wild yeast. That was something not everyone has that skill set. And a friend of mine's very involved at TCU, and I called him and said, hey, happened to be an investor in the company as well. Said, hey, we have this idea to capture a wild yeast, and our head distiller thinks he can do it, but we need access to a science lab with some sophisticated equipment. Mm-hmm. We would love to get into TCU and do that work there. He called the chancellor. Chancellor thought it was a cool idea, called the dean of the biology and chemistry departments. We went in to see them after talking with the chancellor, went in to see them. They thought it was a great kind of exercise.
Yeah, what a fun experiment.
Yeah, faculty, students could get involved in, and gave Rob complete access to the labs. And so all these samples that he got from around DFW, including the one from my buddy's ranch down in Glen Rose, brought them into the lab, see what would grow, begin testing them to see if they show signs of being able to ferment something. And then we got it down to probably 3 or 4 candidates that were working.
Yeah.
And then literally off the Petri dish, you're smelling it, and you get different aromas from the Petri dish. And there was one that we all really liked, which happened to be the pecan nut.
Which is the state tree of Texas, and you got it from a ranch in Glen Rose.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it was really stars aligned. It was really extraordinary.
It was like God wanted TX whiskey to exist.
I think so.
And that's what you use today.
You use it today.
And so
Absolutely.
do you just get lots of you're making these giant jugs of?
We did. Oh my gosh. So it was.
That sounds like an arduous process.
It was because you had to make a batch every week, and so one of us was down at the distillery because you had to. There's a term for it, but basically you would take the yeast and you'd start it from maybe 24 ounces, and you'd have to grow it, the liquid, to ultimately to put in our fermentation tank at the right level, which I think was 5 gallons.
You had to make a lot of it.
You had to make a lot of it, and it took a week-long process. So one of us was, managing that every day, including Saturday, Sunday. We would have to
babysit
propagate
the yeast.
Yeah.
Propagate.
Yeah, you're propagating it. So it was very time-consuming and laborious to do that, but we were committed to it.
And that's what gave it its unique flavor?
Yeah.
Because the other thing that's interesting about what you guys did is
it's an aspect of it.
It did not taste like anything else.
Are you talking about the bourbon or the whiskey?
The whiskey.
Yeah. Whiskey was a different story. So,
this was for the
all
bourbon.
bourbon.
This is for the bourbon.
Yeah.
Which also tastes like, I feel like both of them have a very unique flavor profile.
100%. Because the bourbon is that yeast, which makes a difference. It's why, makers taste the way it does, and Jack and Jim and, all these famous brands have their own proprietary yeast. And so we wanted to,
yours
that.
Not only has a good taste, but it has this
Texas
origin.
Yeah, no, and it's literally our IP. So that was the bourbon. And then the whiskey, what we did was we, originally when we started thinking about the distillery, one of the thoughts was, everyone we knew seemed to drink Crown, and Crown's a great product, of course, Canadian blended whiskey. And we thought, well, why don't we do a Texas blended whiskey? I mean, it's clearly popular. People like it if it tastes good. And that's what we went after. So to do that, we went and found different whiskeys that, and again, it was a ton of experimentation and designed by the three of us, combination of different, basically, ingredients from existing whiskeys combined to create our unique taste.
And so y'all literally just sitting around, a little bit of this, a little bit of this, a little bit of this.
Yeah.
How fun was that?
Yeah. Oh, it was great. It was great. It was great, and it was also terrorizing, right? Because it was fun to do, but ultimately, this was a product we were going to put into the market, and there's a lot of anxiety, right? So, one, it tastes good to us.
Yeah.
Is it going to taste good to anyone else? And then two, same kind of anxieties created around the brand, because again, we were bootstrapping it, no focus group, no kind of research at all. In both cases, product and brand, which arguably there's not two more important things than that.
Yeah, it's everything.
And it's a moment where we had to say, okay, it's a go.
Do you
on
remember
both.
that day when you were like, "That's it"?
Yeah. I mean, for the product, we had a couple different examples. We all took it home for the weekend, came back, and everyone said, "This is the one."
And it was very unique.
Very unique. And
so you're kind of taking another chance there. It would have been safer to say, let's make it taste like
correct
Makers, or let's make it taste. But you guys, you made it. It had this like vanilla, oaky, cinnamony thing.
Yeah, and it did. And I think ultimately now looking back at the product from that perspective, I would say we created and gave people something they didn't know they wanted. They had a perception of whiskey, particularly women, which was one of the biggest surprises we had, was the number of women that told us this was a whiskey they could drink. Because it was so smooth. Because, traditionally it's going to burn, it's going to hurt, that kind of thing. Ours did not, and that was a big surprise. So when I say that we gave them something they didn't know they wanted, it was flavor and just that mouthfeel, kind of all the details around it was super, super helpful from a product standpoint. And then, we work with a graphic artist on the packaging, except for the top, which Troy did, as I mentioned. But we decided we liked TX, and we did a couple different versions of it. And I don't know what it was, but when we got the email with the vertical orientation of the letters, we're like, that's it. That's the one.
You just had the feeling.
Had the feeling.
Did you have the bottles already? Because your bottles were unique too. Because everything traditionally has like angles and there's lines.
I think we had sample bottles. Yeah, we had certainly different versions.
How do you get bottles? Do you go to like, is that made in China or something? Or India?
Yeah, well, there's bottle manufacturers.
Did you design it, or there was like, here's an idea?
The whiskey bottle was what they call a stock bottle. So that was the most affordable route to go if you look closely, you'll probably see that bottle with other brands. With the TX orientation, it just kind of felt different than those other ones. But again, as a startup, that was the right way to go from an affordability standpoint. What we did with the bourbon was kind of the next level of choice is to do a custom bottle where you design it, they create a mold, and a factory produces it, and it's your trademark and IP. And we did that for the bourbons because it's got a very unique shape. And like all the big brands, we wanted ours to be unique.
Yeah.
Like Maker's Jack, Jim, they all have their own crown, their own shape. So we wanted that. So it was fun. We designed the bottle. I went down to, we worked with Owens, Illinois as the bottle manufacturer, and they were going to, or they did ultimately produce it down in Bogota. So I went down there
cool.
as we were doing all the last specs on it and that kind of thing.
And you had the leather on there and the canvas.
Leather,
and it was very earthy feeling.
Yeah, for sure. And we really built off of, again, that kind of the Texas elements of the DNA as we described it. So leather, we thought we always wanted to work that into the packaging somehow. And the elements are all designed with that kind of Western, or I guess applied, with that Western feel. On the bottom of each bottle is a silver band. That was really a nod to saddlery and silver jewelry. That's so important in the West. The canvas that goes around the top was a nod to the stagecoaches that went through Fort Worth.
And is this your storyteller brain that's kind of like
100%, 100%? And we would share that, but it was very prescriptive and methodical because we really wanted to reflect where we were from. TX in a big brand way, but for Fort Worth, the Western life and the horse culture is just such a big part, and obviously bull riding and rodeo and all that is such a big part of the DNA. We wanted to capture that as best we could.
So you have this product, you have the brand, it's then what? Like what was how did it scale? Was it just organic and people started freaking out, or did you like?
It was interesting. So we when we launched, Glazers was our distributor, and it was maybe a half a pallet, right, that Troy and I put together, and took us probably a day to get it wrapped properly because the cases.
You two were doing it?
Oh, hell yeah. We were down there.
You're like pouring it in there and wrapping.
Oh, yeah.
Really?
No. My God, the second year, not to jump ahead, but we were down there Christmas Eve. They had a pickup, and we had to get a pallet ready. And, of course, we dropped everything because the great thing about that business is you have lots of customers, but our paying customer is the distributor. And we were with a great company, and they would pay on 30 days. So collection was never an issue, but side note, but that's important for entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
They called with an order, and we said, yeah, of course. Cause we were,
you got to pay for these Christmas presents I just
bought.
Pay
for it. Exactly. We got the product out there, and a couple interesting things happened. Was one, people started to taste it, and we started to get word that they were liking it. And this was via social media, some email, that kind of thing, but social media primarily. So we did two things that we saw on social media. One was good reviews on the product itself, and then secondly, and completely unexpectedly, people talking about the leather top. And it was crazy.
Because they were all different.
They were different.
From boots.
And what we saw on, it was Facebook, I guess, that entire conversation, real time. I'll never forget it. Where we launched, product gets out there, that we got some press that it was going to be hitting the stores, and people starting to talk about the leather, the color, the skin type, and what stores they were finding them, and people driving across town to pick it up.
And were you posting on social media?
No, we were watching the conversation.
Just watching. Okay.
Yeah. We didn't post much. We're not big social media people, but we were watching the conversation.
You were just using it to see the conversations happen.
Yeah. For sure. And it was fascinating. And that was a moment with the top, at least. We were like, wow, this is powerful, from a marketing and packaging standpoint.
Everyone is different.
Uniqueness. And
kind of like Cracker Jacks. You never know what the prize is going to be.
Yeah, no, that's right.
And
And which was now, of course, reflecting back, we love it for so many reasons. We ultimately got a design patent on the top. But that leather is just so Fort Worth to us,
100%.
and it worked so well to create help create our identity. And that was such a cool time to see how that began to.
So did you feel like it was working? Were you like, was there a moment where
pretty
you're
quickly?
Like,
yeah,
this is
yeah.
Do you remember was it watching Facebook? Was it seeing it in a liquor store? Was it like what was the? Do you have a time and place where it's like pops out as?
Yeah, we were profitable in 6 months.
That's huge.
That was huge. Mm-hmm. We're like, this is something we can build on. Mm-hmm. That was certainly, honestly.
And were you nervous before that?
Oh yeah. I mean, we had a lot on the line. Investors, our time, energy, families.
And it was profitable in 6 months. That's so cool.
Troy and I had to, this was the big pucker factor, to buy our stills. I hadn't thought about this in a while, but to buy the stills, you had to provide an address because it's all federally regulated through the TTB. And just the way it mapped out, I won't go into all the details, but we had to buy the stills, because of the design and build time of the stills was going to be about a year. And so it was all of mapped out on the calendar. And we needed to purchase them. But to purchase them, we had to evidence the address and location of where they would be going. Mm-hmm. And we didn't have a building at that time. And so we had been negotiating with the West Vickery owner, but hadn't committed because one of the big sticking points was the two of us were going to have to give a personal guarantee for the building and 5 years of rental.
Wow.
Which was a ton of money.
That's a lot, yeah.
And
you're signing a lease a year before the still can even go in to even make the products. You're paying that whole time.
Yeah. So that was the big pucker go, no go. Mm-hmm. And we did it. I don't think we told the wives.
If they're listening now, you may be in trouble.
But I'll never forget it. It was, again, another Christmas Eve story. It was Christmas Eve of probably 2010, where the landlord, we had been kind of dragging our feet. And he was like, listen, you got till midnight and we're done.
Wow.
So we did it. And I'll tell you what, that it gets real when you're personally everything on the line.
Yeah.
I mean, neither of us had the money. So that brings certain clarity.
But yeah, it brings clarity, but also like forces you. It's like you take the leap, and it's like you have to take that in order to do it. You have to take that.
Yeah, it's pretty scary.
Wow.
So yeah, when you
it was profitable, you were
a lot on the line. Yeah, that felt good. I mean, it was relief, right? And it just again, consumer products.
Did you go in a store and buy it?
Sure, of course. But a consumer product, you never know. You never know, right? How people are going to react to it, and so it was a relief. Moments along the way that I tell you from a business standpoint, seeing that, that profitability so quickly was amazing, give you comfort. And then also prior to that, seeing how people were responding to the product, to the tours and the facility and, wanting to be there, wanting to have events and weddings and, all those kinds of things, which we didn't anticipate. We felt like there was a moment there where we knew we were on the right track.
Mm-hmm. Do you remember the day when the bourbon came out officially?
Oh yeah,
I drove down there because it was how many years later?
5 years.
5 years.
So I think it was December 16th of 7/16.
The whole city was abuzz. It's finally coming out. We're finally going to taste the thing.
It was really.
And I remember I drove down there because I live up the road in Fairmount. I was like,
okay.
oh, that sounds fun. I'll go check it out.
Yeah.
And I was like, hell no.
Yeah.
There was like 2,000 people outside.
Yeah. We had no idea, honestly, and there's no way we could ever recreate that. But
The line around the building.
there's probably 3,000 people, and I feel so fortunate because so many people work so hard to get to that point. Number one, with our team, and so that was a remarkable moment for everyone. And then additionally, just more maybe selfishly, and I just probably know that something like that in a career is maybe once in a lifetime, and I'm just so thankful, privileged to have a moment like that, because it was really the icing on the cake, and I know will never happen again.
Yeah.
And it was
And you couldn't get it anywhere. You literally couldn't get it. It was sold out at all these stores.
I think we only had, I want to say it's like 500 cases that went out.
Wow. Because it took you 2 years, 5 years.
That was 5 years.
It took you 5 years to make that.
Yeah. So that was a really, again, cool moment for the company, cool moment personally.
And you had to staff up. You had to.
Yeah. Because I think by that time we had made the decision, probably in 2015, to scale the business, and very purposefully, again, one of those long, multiple conversations between Troy and I, to scale the business. And so we were doing well, and again, won't forget it.
But to scale means you have to reinvest. It means we're kind of doubling down.
Yeah, and we by that time we were doing pretty well, growing our footprint in production. We saw other competitors now getting into the space in Texas, and our instinct was somebody's going to scale in a significant way. And literally we had this conversation, well, why not us? Why don't we be the guys to do it and do something really big on the level of what you would find in Kentucky, Tennessee, or so forth. And, again, few conversations, detailed conversations, we're like, yeah, let's go chase it. And that's when we decided to build that plan, do all almost from starting from scratch.
And it started with a bigger space.
Bigger space.
You wanted to do a whole bigger experience.
Yeah, bigger experience.
It allows you to make more, ship more, and then
absolutely
have more people in.
All of that.
So it was centered around this sort of real estate.
Yeah. Yeah, it was an important part of it, of course. Critical part of it, I should say. But it was a new business plan. You made a whole new business plan. Yeah, for sure. Because to answer your question, we had to go out and raise more money to do it.
Oh, so you raised money. You raised money a second time.
Yeah.
Okay.
So in our history, we just did it twice, and that was very fortunate. But again, we were probably not yet at the size where we could go to a bank and just say, hey, this is a multi-million-dollar project. As a small business, we feel like we're doing pretty well. Would you finance this? We weren't there. So we had to go to private equity. And that proved to be a really good, we found a good partner, and patient capital kind of perspective. And that was very successful in allowing us to grow the business the way we did.
Did you have the space, the golf course picked out first, or did you have the money committed first?
No, we didn't. We had the money committed, so we had that powder available, and it was an incredibly frustrating year, actually. After we had that powder, had the ability to go do it, we just couldn't find the right spot, and we needed acreage because we needed to build aging barns for the bourbon, and so we were looking. I mean, we looked at ranches. We wanted to stay close to home, but with acreage, that's obviously going to be challenging. And we just could never find the right spot. We could find maybe the land, but then to bring the utilities in to create a factory, I mean, it was just got very complicated. So, and expensive. So, again, one of those stories. We were at the West Vickery facility, probably 4:30 one evening, and I'm on LoopNet, which, and we had a broker and so forth, and we were just frustrated. It had been a year.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at LoopNet, kind of scrolling through properties in Fort Worth, and see this golf course for sale.
The golf course is on LoopNet. That's wild.
And I was like, oh my God. So it's Glen Garden Country Club for sale. Go over to Troy's office, and I said, man, have you ever heard of Glen Garden? He's like, yeah, I've played out there. Like, you know it's for sale? Like, no. And I was like, showed him what it was. It was like, well, let's go out there. So we went out there and walked in the pro shop. And by this time, it's probably whatever, 5:30. And we convinced the pro that we were out there to consider buying the property. He didn't know us from Adam.
Yeah.
And we would love to jump on a golf cart and look around. And he was like, okay, all right, be quick. So we did that. It's 112 acres and drove around. And we're like, this could really work. It was 2.5 miles, I guess, 3 miles from the distillery. And that just then led to a series of events and getting the property under contract.
'Cause that's
and
a wild thing. We're going to buy a country club, a golf course for our whiskey.
We may have
dream.
had a cocktail, that afternoon.
I mean, that's such a ballsy, crazy move.
Yeah.
But it was remarkable. I mean, when you drive out and you go down the long driveway and you see the fountain, I mean, the craziness of it is part of what made it so cool.
I think so. And it just got better and better, as we got into it. And, you mentioned the drive-in. That was, again, we had a great architect out of Denver that helped us. And I remember having that conversation because it's all around, how do you create how do you create a sense of place? And it's placemaking. And that driveway was very prescriptive because we wanted people to come in and have this moment of just entrance to sort of take it all in.
Like Jurassic Park, you're driving in.
Yeah,
and you see
that's right. And then the buildings emerge. And, so we did some fun things there, but it was an extraordinary, again, one of these little twists of fate that just worked so well because not only was it the acreage we needed, it was in Fort Worth, and had Glen Garden had this remarkable history where Ben Hogan and Byron Nelson grew up caddying and playing there, which is literally something you could never think of or hope for or create of two global icons. And so the reason that was important was that ultimately when we bought it, we got all the memorabilia, and you've been out there, we could incorporate that story or those people that are iconic globally into our story. And it was kind of very organic and natural because we left much of the golf course as it was originally and still is, and people play out there. And it just was super powerful because at the end of the day, when you get out there, you're there for that experience. You're there to hear that story, and it's really a rich story in lots of ways, from the product to the place.
But you got some pushback from it too. It's like the neighbor.
Yeah, a little bit.
Now you're a councilman, but was that sort of your introduction into the world of politics? Was through that? And it was such a good thing for the neighborhood. It was good for tourism. It was good for Fort Worth.
Sure. Yeah. Now more than ever, I see both sides of the argument, so to speak, from being on the developer side to speak to the neighborhood at the time to build our facility to now working with a lot of developers and neighborhoods in sometimes defending neighborhoods that development doesn't make sense. And so it's been really 360 in terms of that perspective, which has been great. And I certainly could use, again, on the development side, that experience and apply it to what I'm doing now, no question.
So I know you have to take off here in a second because
pretty soon it's Global Entrepreneur Week, and we're okay.
Okay,
we're okay.
So
got to
fast forward. I want to fast forward to what you're doing now.
Yeah.
So you bought Whiskey Ranch. You put it in this crazy place. You scaled it.
Yeah.
And then were you approached? Were y'all approached, or were you like looking for that, or what was?
We were approached, and
you were approached.
It really was.
This is your baby.
Yeah, it was our baby, and we were having a lot of fun working again hard at it. But it was fun being out there, and that was a tipping point, though, in that the place, as I was just describing, is so remarkable. And has all these elements of storytelling and content, as I was talking about before. And importantly, Troy and I, when we built it, again, as I was talking about earlier, the essence of that was we want to build a global brand. And if we want to build a global brand.
You were saying that out loud.
Yes.
We want a global brand.
Absolutely. The two of us. And it was, why not us? It can come from Texas. Why not us? So let's scale it. Let's design it. Let's have the ability to actually fulfill that dream from a production standpoint. So once we did that, it was very clear that the combination of things of a good product, a great facility, the ability to scale to produce the juice for the global audience, global consumer base, those are the elements that are important to multinationals. That we had always thought of, down the road, that could be an exit for us. And building Whiskey Ranch and seeing how, honestly, I'm very proud of it, as you would imagine, but well done it is. And kind of checks all those boxes. There were many that came knocking very quickly, and we were getting market share. And then we had this facility, and so those conversations started not long after that we built the ranch. And as I said, all the top guys came by to see us.
And y'all had to make the decision. And you did.
Yeah. Well, it was fun or funny that we ultimately did, of course. But again, for entrepreneurs, the strongest position that we were in, the greatest leverage that we had in those conversations was that we could say no. And that happened. That happened even at West Vickery, and then happened early on with Whiskey Ranch. We said, no, we're not ready. We're not interested. We're having fun. We're building something. And as intriguing as that is, we're just not ready. And I think that was unexpected.
Yeah.
And that happened actually when we were raising money the second time, when we were talking to people, because we were popular enough that people were kind of pursuing us. And again, when we were negotiating, we were like, no,
we don't have to do this.
We don't need to do this.
This is fun. It's working.
Yeah.
We just spent years designing this,
right.
this golf course, and now it's finally done. And
it's a really lucky position to be in.
And so, and the other thing is, like, you get to see it go to the global level. You get to kind of entrust it into someone that now knows really how to do that.
Yeah. And now knowing what we know, we would obviously, as entrepreneurs, you figure things out, but what Pernod does for us is they're a great company out of Paris. And just one small fact about them is, they have global brands that we all know, Jameson, Absolute, others. but what they uniquely have, they own their own distribution globally, where typically people partner with different folks in different countries, different continents, and they own it all. Which is very unique. So they can really control. They can really lean into brands, and we thought that was very advantageous.
Yeah. So now, did you slow down for a little bit? Did you take a year or so off? Did you?
Well, in a way, I guess I did, because of course COVID hit. We closed in September of 19, and then COVID hit a couple months later, and we were under contract with Pernod and a term, and we were mostly going to do promotion and marketing things, but that pretty much shut down. And interestingly, so during quarantine, during that terrible time, the mayor reached out, as you mentioned at the intro, and said, hey, we've got some CARES Act money. Could you help us figure out how to distribute it? And particularly in the hospitality arena, because these
are your people,
are being so hard hit. And I said, sure, I'd be happy to help. And it was meaningful to me because here we had just closed on our deal, feeling pretty good about it. And now under COVID and the quarantine, here were a lot of my friends, right, with businesses and people that had supported us through the years and really helped build our brand. And it started in Fort Worth in every possible way. The support we got, people were hurting, and I was like, absolutely, I'll help. And so just quick story. So started doing that, and the council member at the time, Dennis Shingleton, we were talking one day, and I was telling him, hey, this is really rewarding to be helping the community in this way. And he said, well, if you like the work, I'm going to retire here at the end of this term. You may want to think about running. And
so you didn't have ambitions for it. He kind of planted the seed.
He did. And so I kind of went back and forth.
What was your initial reaction?
I was like, I don't know. This seems like once we get out of COVID, this could be a nice lifestyle. But I just, thought about it and talked to my wife about it, and it truly did feel good to give back and help people that were, again, hurting. And so back and forth about consideration and really trying to do due diligence on what it would mean to run for office and be in office. And sometimes I feel like I didn't do enough due diligence there, but because it's a big commitment. Yeah. Ultimately talked to enough people and felt like, hey, this you'd be good at it. We think you'd be good at it, and give it a go. And so I decided to run. And at the end of the day, for me, it's just another chance to give back, knowing that it's not a career for me. Yeah. And so it's like I'm totally comfortable with that.
There's no ambitions. It's on service for the sake of I get to do it. It's a privilege.
Yeah.
And have you enjoyed it?
I'm good. Yeah, it's been great. It is a lot of hard work.
Your favorite part of the job right now? Favorite thing you get to do?
Economic development. And really following the mayor's leadership. Mayor Parker is just doing such a great job. She's really fun to work with.
She's fantastic.
Yeah, is just the best, and has a good direction for the city, a good vision, and is following through with that. And one of those areas, and there are many, but one is economic development. And she created a entrepreneurism and innovation committee that she asked me to chair, which we've been doing the last year, and have done some good things. I think we got a little more work to do to actually apply some of the ideas that we've been talking about as a committee. But I think it just, the committee in and of itself is such a great example of the vision that she has, because it is entrepreneurial in and of itself. I don't know of many other cities that have something like it, but it's really just helping to stir the conversation. And there are other ones going on, like Global Entrepreneur Week that I'll be going to here in a minute. But and it's just great. You can sort of feel it's a young council, young mayor. We're growing so fast, 12th largest city in the country now.
Because you built that ranch, people want to come see it.
Yeah, indeed. But it's sort of this generational change, and I can feel it happening in a different way than certainly in our whiskey sales, but see it in the growth that's coming in the conversations I'm having at City Hall, to really see firsthand how people are so excited about Fort Worth and why they want to come here.
Yeah.
And, the big challenge is, taking advantage of that without losing our back to that DNA thing, that core DNA of what makes Fort Worth so cool and why we all enjoy living here.
I love it. When you think about legacy and that sort of idea, what does that mean to you? What do you want your legacy to be or be remembered for?
Well, interesting question. I would think, first off, great husband, great dad. Kids are the legacy in my mind, and hopefully providing them the right structure and tools to go on and do great things and have great families. I think that would be a fantastic legacy, number one. And then, more professionally, I would say it's a body of work. And I look at sort of these different things that I've done in my career that all, somewhat are linked, but are very distinct and different for different reasons at that time in life. That I pursued, and that's been pretty gratifying. And, so it's a body of work of things that you enjoy doing, number one. I find satisfying. You make a living at times when you need to do that, obviously. But, doing things that excited me and I'll tell you, the running for city council is a really good example of this that I share with my kids, which is get out of your comfort zone, and this was the most uncomfortable I've ever been.
You're in the crosshairs. You're in the
Absolutely.
public eye when you do that. Yeah.
Just have no idea of what it's like to be a candidate, what it's like to be in office, what the expectations are, very, very unsettling at times. But you get through it and you grow and you learn. And I feel that's certainly happened every step of the way, from city council to, that first job selling advertising and walking into somebody's store and introducing myself and trying to sell. It's uncomfortable, but you work at it long enough, you get better at it. And you do those things, inevitably, at least for me, stimulates other ideas, stimulates other thoughts, and sort of what could be exciting, and what could I do that would be interesting.
And what a great lesson to teach. Get out of your comfort zone.
I think so.
Yeah,
I think so. It's important.
Well, this was a great conversation. Thanks for sharing your story. I appreciate it's inspiring, and just I think there was a lot of strategy and you tapping into some really beautiful, neat things just with all of it, but also just hearing some of the providence behind some of it as well. Just from the loop nut story to the pecan it's cool just hearing some of those moments. Like, man, there was some favor there. Like, God was had a course for you, and you were chasing it down, but also, like, man, just
His hand was on
divine moments there too.
His hand was on it.
Yeah.
My wife and I talk about that quite a bit, because there was just some extraordinary things that were beyond planning and good timing or good luck that fell our way, and we're just incredibly fortunate for that.
I love it. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
I've enjoyed it.
All right.
I've enjoyed it. Thank you.
Congratulations, you made it all the way to the end. Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of Stories with Soul. If you enjoyed the interview and like what you heard, please help us out and share, subscribe, and like anywhere you listen to podcasts. When you share and subscribe, it is insanely helpful and allows us to keep producing new episodes. You can always join us directly in the studio by watching the video version on our website, 6thAveStorytelling.com. Stories with Soul is brought to you by 6th Ave Storytelling, an organic marketing company building standout brands on the foundation of story. You're obsessed with your business, and we want to make the world obsessed with it too. Thanks for listening.